What's up guys, and welcome back to the Bonsai-En YouTube channel. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be doing some maintenance work on this Juniper Bonsai, so stick around. Alright, so before we start, if today's video is helpful to you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment to help our videos reach more people in the algorithm on YouTube. So, for today's video, like I mentioned in the intro, we have this Juniper Bonsai here. This is one that we have been developing at Bonsai-En for quite a few years now. And it's gone into the bonsai pot, but it's had some remedial work over the last couple of years. Just trying to get the branches to push back a little bit closer in towards the trunk. That way we don't have a super elongated design. We can compact this up a little bit more. But what we need to do today is just go through and do some essentially housekeeping on this tree. We need to make some choices about some branches to get rid of that are no longer going to suit the design. We need to maybe clean up the deadwood a little bit. Because we're moving into winter now, we need to make some adjustments to the soil surface, maybe take some of that fertilizer off from last season that has hardened up and become crusty. That's going to prevent percolation and all those kinds of things. We may even need to chuck some wire on, move some branches around, do a little bit of pruning on this tree. So this video is going to show you quite a few things that we're going to do to this Juniper Bonsai just as maintenance. So let's get stuck into it. One of the first things that I want to look at on this tree today is if I spin it around to the back around here, we have this branch here, which is really quite heavy on the tree. It's emanating from up in here, inside the trunk. It does have quite a nice bend on it from where it leaves, but the problem is if we look at this tree and the design that this tree is taking on, it's quite a minimalist design, and we don't want it to be really big and heavy in terms of the amount of foliage that we keep on. Even where these little pads are now, we need to clean these up and we need to lighten them up a bit because this tree is just way too heavy at the moment, especially for the size of the trunk that we've got here. It's overpowering the deadwood a little bit at the back, so we need to lighten it up. And as you can see, this is the branch in question here. And if this is the front of the tree, you don't really see it from the front anyway. It's just, and I mean, it's filling in all this area in the back here. It's grown quite large. And around the back here, if we were to take it out, we're really not missing anything. And it actually makes the design a whole lot cleaner. We may even have to take this one out as well, but we'll check that out afterwards. But what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to come in and I'm going to cut this one off. And I am going to leave a little bit of this wood here just in case, because later on we might want to make a gin, but I mean I don't think so, just because we've got so much dead wood going on at the back of the tree. I really don't think that we need any more, but I would rather have that still there just in case something tells me later on that it's better off in the design than out of the design. So as you can see, we've just cut that off there, and way too heavy for the tree. And we've just opened that up a little bit more now, which will make it a little bit easier for me to, to get the design where I'm going. You can see we've got this nice negative space underneath the tree under here now, and we're getting closer to that, design that we're going for here. Some of this stuff might actually need to be adjusted up a little bit. So this branch here, we might have to get rid of some of this stuff on the bottom there. But that's the first thing that I wanted to do today, was just get that big branch off of there because it was serving absolutely no purpose. So we can get rid of that. So now that we've got rid of that bigger one around the back here, I've actually had a bit of a look off camera, and I really do think I'm going to get rid of this one as well. And the reason being is, so you can see from the front, so I've got this kind of design going on. Well, it'll probably come up more up to here once we lift these bottom branches up a bit. So we could lift this bottom branch up as well, but if we turn the tree this way, and we need to remember that when we're designing bonsai, even though this might be the front of the tree, there's still a chance that people are going to look at it from this angle, and they're going to look at it from this angle, and they're going to look at it from this angle. Now, when we turn it to this angle, you can see that it's kind of just a big mess of foliage, and there's no real design here. It doesn't really look any good. And one thing that I'd like to achieve here, if I can, is if we've got our apex up here, as we move down to the bottom of the tree, it'd be nice if we could get that to kind of taper in somewhere down towards the end. So by removing this branch, see, we've already started that tapering process, and potentially by moving a branch like this in and pruning it up a little bit, we'll be able to actually, you know, get that tapering effect happening a bit more. So you can see now how it's starting to taper more down towards that tip, rather than just having this big, almost square, as you can see, it's almost this big square mass of foliage when you look at it from that side. So we're going to come through and we're going to take that one off as well. And I'm just going to take this one all the way off, because I know for sure that I don't want any type of dead wood just there. So that's our next branch that we've removed from the tree. And this is something, when you're doing bonsai, really don't be afraid to remove branches, especially if they're going to do a good thing for the design. So the next thing that we're going to want to come in and have a look at now is cleaning up all this foliage. So I'll bring the camera in a little bit closer into one of the pads. We'll have a look at what that entails on one pad, and then I'll go through and do the tree and we can come back and have a look. So what we have here is one of the lower pads on the tree. Now I've done my best to try and choose a pad that's going to show you this in the most detail, but these junipers, they're not the easiest tree in the world to film. So what we're going to look at here is essentially all the stuff within here that we need to clean up, and how we can make a good pad out of this. Now the first thing is, I always go through and I clean up any crutch growth. And what we mean by crutch growth is, so you can see here where we've got this bifurcation here, and I know that's a little bit blurry. Let me just try and fix that a little bit there for you. Alright. So you can see that we've got this bifurcation here, and right in the middle of it, we've got this new growth. And if left untouched, this new growth can take off, and then we get swelling here because we've got 1, 2, 3 all in the one junction. So really we need to come through and we need to prune out that crutch growth. There was actually 2 bits in there. So we just get that out of there like that. Let me just rotate this towards myself so I can get the rest of that out of there. There we go. So now it's nice and clean, we've got that out of there. And that's why a nice small set of sharp scissors really comes in handy, because once you start doing this fine work and you need to get into these nice tight spaces like this, these scissors are going to be a godsend. Trying to get secateurs or kitchen scissors or whatever into a tiny little gap like that's just not really going to do it. So now you can see just up a little bit further, we've got another example of this just in here. So we're just going to come in and we're just going to nip that off of there, and we're going to clean that up. And then as we come down a bit further, we've got more examples of that in here. Now this, while this is not totally right in the crutch up in here, it is within this area, and we've got no room in here to make a branch anyway. So really we want to get rid of this stuff because it's just going to cause congestion up in there. And especially, you know, when we start putting wire on and we want to start moving some of these branches in closer to each other, we don't want all this stuff existing within these little spaces that we've got. Now, the other thing that we want to look at is how we're going to make our pad once we come down here. So you can see that our essential structure is we've got this one here, then we've got this one up next to it, then we've got another one here, and then we've got another one over here to this side, which is what you're seeing here. And this could essentially be our, when we talk about our hand-shaped pattern with our fingers splayed out, That could be the bottom of the pad. And then we're obviously going to need some body up in here because we don't just want the pad open like that. And that's where we can bring something like this down and we can fill in that gap and see how that gives us that body. So when we're wiring, we want to make sure that, one, we clean out all up in here because all that stuff's going to get shaded out anyway once we bring this in. And we're going to want to wire this into the top. So as we're making our pad down here, we'll probably put some wire on these little ones. And rather than just having these all straight and uninteresting, I'll probably, so this little guy here, we'll probably pull him in nice and close to the trunk, to the main branch, our primary branch first. So rather than having this big obtuse angle here where it leaves the primary branch, we'll bring that in nice and closer like that. See how that looks nicer already? And then we'll just put some nice gentle movement in that branch so it's not so uninteresting. Same on this side. We can bring this guy in closer first and then out later, and that just adds some interest. Same with these two down here. We can bring these two in closer with each other and then put some movement on them, and that'll make that pad, once we do all that and then put this on top, that'll create a nice interesting little pad. If we do that over the whole entire tree, then we're going to have a lot more open tree, because the other thing that I want to talk about here is with these bonsai designs, what happens over time is they start to elongate. So this pad down the bottom here will actually start to get away from the tree. And as that happens, we actually need stuff further back to start growing to replace that, which is, I don't know if you can see up in here, yep. So see these little buds up in here? I'm likely to keep these ones. Where, see this one in the crutch? I'm likely to, this one's actually small enough I can just pull it off, but I can get that off of there. But these ones up in here, we're going to want to keep these because as this branch grows out in time, this one back here that I've got in my hand, as this grows out, this is going to be our replacement. So we're going to want these to grow. But to get these to grow, we're going to need to get light and air to them. If the tree's too dense, we're not going to get that light and air in there to have these replaced. Now, I have heard people say, and I've read it on Facebook and things like that, that you should never get rid of the crutch growth on junipers because that's what you're going to have to replace your branches with later. But as you can see, you don't want to keep the crutch growth because that's going to grow in here, that's going to cause swelling for now, and we're going to have issues. What you want to keep is this stuff that's away from the crutches. This stuff is so much better to keep than stuff that's in the crutches that's going to just cause issues later on. So this stuff up in here, right, I'm not going to keep these here because they're right in the crutch of this branch that we want to keep. That's going to become our body for this up in here. So we're going to get rid of that. But the healthier we make this tree and the more light and air that we get up into these branches, we're going to get more buds up in here anyway. And they're going to grow out of where the crutches are, and they're going to be like these little ones up in here that have grown here that aren't in a crutch, and they're, these are closer back towards our primary branch here anyway. So as this grows out, we can use these as a body. Then later on, and it's even the same up here. So you can see here how we've got our main branches for this, and then we're going to have our body that's going to come in. And you can see our body is coming from a lot further up the branch here. Eventually, this little body branch here, as it grows and as these ones get too far out of the design, this here is going to become this in future years. And at some point, we'll have another bud that'll grow up further that'll become the body to this. So you can see how there's just this always, and I can't get my hand close enough, but you've got your bottom of the branch and you've got the top of the branch. As that grows out, this comes in and replaces it, and then something new comes in over the top to replace that. And it's just this cycle of always growing and replacing, growing and replacing. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the rest of the tree now. I'm going to clean out all the pads, and we're going to reduce our branching, and then we can come back and wire up, and we're going to have a much better time wiring because we're not going to have to wire around a whole bunch of crutch growth. We're going to be able to see what we're doing, and we're going to be able to set our branches nicer. Alright, so it's been pruned up a little bit now. You can see a little bit further in through all those branches there, a little bit of the clutter's been taken out. So the next job that we've got to do here now is go through and put some wire on, and we can start moving these branches into their places. Now, I'm not going to do a whole bit on wiring here. I'll leave a link on the screen where you can go to the bonsaidojo.com and check out either our Bonsai 101 course, which has the wiring section in there, or we do have the wiring section available on its own if you'd like to learn wiring more in depth. But let's get some wire on this tree and get some of these branches moved. Now that the wire's on and we've moved our branches, you can see the shape of the tree starting to come together. Now, we've put a rough apex on here. It needs to be compressed on this back side but elongated on the front side. And as you can see, we've got this gap in here that needs to be filled, and that'll be filled over the next growing season or so. There are a few gaps left in the tree. I'll give you a quick spin. As you can see, we've somewhat taken that square look out of the front of it. We've opened it up a bit. You can see that there's a fairly large gap around the back here that also needs to be filled. But this is the thing when we come in and do these kind of designs, is we don't want to just move things to fill gaps for the sake of it if it's not going to actually do a good job of filling that gap. So I'd rather put things where they would be nicer and then let the tree just grow a little bit more and try and fill in those spaces. So that way, you're not, as I said, you're not kind of forcing something into a space where it's not going to do as well. So the next thing that we kind of got to do on this tree now is come in and fix up the surface a little bit. Got to take some wire off some of the roots that are wired out to make a Nebari. We'll get some of this old fertilizer off. We've got sphagnum moss on the surface here, which was for our hotter months. That just helps keep a bit more moisture in and bring the roots up to the surface of the soil so we can fill the whole entire pot. So we need to get that done. We need to do some deadwood cleaning and reapply lime sulfur. The other thing I will mention too about, the current state of this design, as you can see, it's nowhere near ready to be shown or anything like that. It's still very, very rough. It's in its early refinement stages, and you can see that the pads are very rough. They haven't got that real neat, clean shape to them. But once again, we've just positioned everything to where it now sits in a nice spot, and then over the next growing season or two, we can actually refine those pads out much nicer, and then the tree will actually start to really take shape then. But we can't rush this into, a kind of half-assed design now just to get that instant bonsai. I'm not designing these trees straight away so that people will come to the garden and be super impressed with what I've done. I really want to make sure that these trees, are heading in the right direction, and if I have to have a tree that doesn't look so great for a season or two, well then that's just what you got to do. But let's get into this soil surface here and see if we can fix up some of the issues and do some maintenance here. Okay, so we're in nice and close now to the soil surface, so you can see that sphagnum moss, and you can see that we've got the fertilizer baskets here with the fertilizer in them. As we spin around, you can see that some of these roots actually have wire on them from where we've been creating that Nebari. And there's a couple of little weeds here and there within the tree, so we'll have to take care of them. Now the other thing is, once we get under this sphagnum moss, we're going to have to work back a little bit of the top part of the soil, because what I do is when I fertilise, I use organic fertilisers. And even though they're in these cups, they've got to be changed out every 4 weeks. So as I change out these cups, I'll pull them out and I'll actually dump the fertiliser onto the surface. Now this one, if I was to do that, that's kind of what that would look like. And then I would put this back, and then I would fill this with the new fertiliser. So these fertilisers, they say that they're spent within 4 weeks, but I feel like there is still stuff in there that can help the tree. And sorry I can't be real scientific about that like I normally am, but I just don't feel like that it's completely spent within 4 weeks. So I put it on the surface, And once again, that just helps add like a surface layer as well. But the problem with doing this is this organic fertilizer, the more and more it breaks down, the crustier it becomes and the harder it becomes. And then if you leave it on there too long, it'll actually start rejecting water. So I find, sometimes I might have to, do a surface scraping near the end of summer maybe. But normally I can get all the way through the growing season, get to winter, scrape it off, and then start again for the next season. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to take these fertilizer cups off. Just like that. And I don't know if you can see on the camera, you can see a little bit, but see where the roots actually come all the way to the surface and they grow up into those fertilizer cups? That's such a good sign. That means that we're actually filling this whole entire pot full of roots, which is exactly what we want. When we've got such a small real estate for root growth, we want to make sure that we fill the whole entire thing. Now, as you can see here, I've just got a bamboo chopstick. So I'm just going to go through and let me just lock off this turntable for a second so it doesn't start spinning on me. I'm going to come through and I'm just going to first start trying to remove some of this sphagnum moss off here. This stuff can become quite hard too after a while. And I'll just do this little section in here between these roots just to show you how it's done. That way we don't have to sit here and go around the whole entire tree. But really first I'm just trying to get the sphagnum moss off. And then once we reach the sphagnum moss, we're going to get to that soil surface. And then we're going to want to come through and just lightly scrape off part of the soil, the top part. And this will actually open the soil back up to percolation again and let that water through. And you can actually come through with your brush and you can give that a bit of a clean off. Just like that. And you can actually see that this tree is in inorganic medium, so pumice Akadama, Kiryu as well. But see how the top of it looks like it's actually organic? That's because of all the fertilizer that's actually seeped down into it. You can see the bits of pumice and stuff coming out of it, but I often get people asking me that, I teach about using inorganic substrates, and then they see my trees and they almost look like they're in an organic substrate, but that is just the fertilizer that's built up on the top level of the soil. And it's good to see lots of roots up near the top of this soil surface. It's exactly what we want. I don't know if you can see there, but we're actually starting to get another one of the Nebari roots appear back in again here after we've uncovered all that. So that's that section done now. Essentially what I would do now is, once I've done the whole tree, I would come through with some finer Akadama and I would actually resurface the top of this with that finer Akadama. So I'm not just going to leave, these big holes and things like that here and leave this open like this. I'll come in and I'll put another layer on top of Akadama. But I'll go around now and I'll do the rest of the tree, get this sphagnum moss off, get the old fertilizer off, and then we'll come back and have a look at getting this wire off the roots. Alright, let's give you a spin here so you can see the surface of the soil all cleaned off. And as I said, this is just part of regular maintenance, making sure that the tree still percolates. You get rid of all that sphagnum moss off there, especially coming into winter. We don't want all that moisture staying in the tree now, and that's exactly what sphagnum moss is going to do. It's going to lock that moisture in, and we want to make sure that the soil is still percolating, and having that organic fertilizer broken down on there definitely can stop that. So the next thing we're going to do now is just come in with our trusty wire cutters, and we're going to start taking some of this wire off the roots. And I do often wire roots out in a Nebari. I just find it's a good way to get the movement that you want in the roots. One of the other things that I'll sometimes do is actually, let me just turn this, I'm trying to do it back to front for the camera, but it's not really working. There we go. The other thing that I'll do is I'll make like a horseshoe with a piece of wire and create what I call a pin, and I can actually move roots and then pin them down. But sometimes if you've got thicker roots, then it's better just to put some wire on there and just get some nice movement in them. As you can see, it comes off nice and easy with the trusty wire cutters. And I think that's all of it. But you can definitely see around this side of the tree, the roots aren't as interesting as around the front of the tree. You know, much more interest around here, which is partly the reason why we chose the front of the tree on this side. It definitely could have been this side, but definitely much more interesting Nebari on this side. So the next thing we're going to do now is go through and clean up some of this dead wood. I'm not going to show that because I've already done a full complete video on that. So after you finish this one, if you want to see how to clean the deadwood in detail, then go and check out our deadwood cleaning video. So I'm just going to clean up some of this deadwood, then we'll put some fresh Akadama on the top of this soil surface, and we should be just about done. Alright, so we've done the deadwood maintenance, so I'm just going to come in and put some fresh Akadama on top, and I've just got a bag here that I've sieved some Akadama into. So I'm just going to come through and just put a fresh layer on the surface here and try and go in between the Nebari here. And then this will just keep the moisture in the surface, because we don't want the surface to completely dry out, because then roots won't occupy the surface. And as I said, we want roots to occupy as much of the real estate in the pot as we possibly can. So this is why a layer of Akadama on top will be good for this. And also too, it just makes it look a whole lot nicer. And you can see how these scoops really come in handy for this kind of work. go. Now I've got some nice fresh Akadama on the top of there, and it also makes that Nebari stand out a little bit more. You can go through and just flatten it down a little bit. That way some of the roots come back through the Akadama. You can see them a little bit better. And this will need a really good wash off too, just to get all the dust off it. But that's that part done. Alright, so as you can see, we've finished our maintenance now. We've cleaned up the top of the tree, we've given it a prune, got rid of some of the branches we didn't need, wired up the branches into their places. We've cleaned up the dead wood, reapplied lime sulfur, taken the wire off the roots, cleaned up the root surface, and reapplied Akadama. Now this is just some of the maintenance that you can do to your Juniper Bonsai coming into winter. There are reasons to do all this stuff. Like we said, we're letting light and air into the inner buds. We're trying to restore percolation into the soil system, and also just trying to maintain our trees and move them forward in refinement and make them look a little bit nicer. But if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment, and we'll see you in the next one.